All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. Hopefully you had a few minutes there to step away from the computer, breathe some fresh air, do whatever you needed to do real quickly. So let's come back together for our Managers Lessons Learned panel. So this will be our wrap-up discussion for our track this afternoon. And we do have a number of managers who volunteered to share some advice with all of you. I just want to run through, let's do an audio check with each of our managers that's on the line. And I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves as well. So Bob, why don't we go to you first?
Hi, everybody. This is Bob Amrine. I'm from the Lewis Conservation District. Nice to be here. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Bob. Your audio is loud and clear. That's great. Craig, how about you? How's your audio?
Well, hopefully it's good. Good afternoon, everybody. Craig Nelson, Okanagan Conservation District.
Excellent. Thank you, Craig. Mark, how about you?
Mark Nilsson. I've been managing Benton Conservation District for 12 years and Franklin Conservation District for over 30. So you get no audio today because I have a face that was made for radio. So
That's perfectly all right, Mark. My bandwidth doesn't support my video, so you only get to hear my radio voice as well. And Renee, how about you?
Hi, Renee Hadley, Walla Walla County Conservation District. I have been here for about 5.5 years or so, and before that I was in private consulting.
Thanks, Renee. Thanks all of the managers for being with us this afternoon. So you all the managers on the panel have the ability to mute and unmute yourselves. But let's kick off our roundtable discussion this morning. You see a couple of questions on the screen. What I'd like to do is go to each of you and ask you to share your thoughts around the first question. And we'll go through each of us, and then we'll drop down and we'll work through a round on that second question. So Bob, I'm going to go to you first. You just happen to appear at the top of my list in the platform here. What's your advice for new managers for working successfully with a board?
Okay, I thought of a lot of things. Of course, you can't go through them all, but the best thing I think is to get to know your board, get to know how they like to communicate. I have board members who do not like email, so is it face-to-face, telephone, but communicate with your board as much as you can, and make sure your board has the knowledge of the trainings that are available, and try to get them involved with WACD, the area meetings, the annual meetings. The more you can get them involved so they understand what we do and how we do it, the better, easier it is for you. Wade's a great opportunity for board members. Unfortunately, I have a hard time getting my members to go, but we still try to, give them information that comes through Wade at times. One thing that I did, when I started as a tech, but I actually got on a quasi-judicial board, a board of zoning adjustment for the city of Chehalis, and it made it very helpful for me to understand how they operate and things they can do and can't do. Because there was an attorney on that board with me that was very helpful. But make sure the board understands our law. That's another huge one, 8908. Go over it with them, go over the specific parts, specifically the parts about the powers and the duties of the supervisors and the auditor, and then the 14 bullets that are in there under 8908.220, the powers of the district. So I think that going over that annually with them is very helpful. The other thing that I think that once in a while, and don't come out very often, but make sure your board don't do things that are capricious, erroneous, or arbitrary. Those are the three main things that could get the quasi-judicial board in trouble. But understand, what they're on the board for and what you can do to help them. And last of all, what I would recommend everybody doing is every time you get a chance to thank your board, thank them for doing what they do, because they're volunteers, and some of them take a lot of time to help us out.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks. Great advice. Great advice. Craig, let's go to you. What's your advice for new managers for working successfully with a board?
I agree with everything Bob said. I think he had excellent points. I'm reminded of a couple of things that were taught to me by previous managers that some of you may recognize the names. But the first one was don't surprise your board. They should never be surprised at a board meeting. If you go to a board meeting with something new that they don't know anything about, it puts them in a really difficult position to figure out, what they should do, what the response should be, things like that. So, do everything that is legally allowed. You can't send out things and ask them for decisions by emails because that's a violation of open public meetings and all that kind of stuff. But, give them a call, talk to them, maybe even send them an email that has just information for them. But I've always found that it's best to just, have the phone call with them, just to let them know what's going on. They can ask, questions to get more clarification or whatever. But that way, when you bring it up in a board meeting, they're not surprised and they're not put on in a difficult spot. And that was advice that was given to myself and I think many others by Rich Baden, who used to manage the Spokane CD. So I think it's one that I've certainly followed for the better part of 20 plus years. So. The other one is, if you're asked to do something that's not illegal or immoral, do it. I've heard of a lot of managers that kind of push back to board members about, what they should or shouldn't be doing. But, they are the ones that set the policy for the district, and they expect you to carry it out. And so that one was from Claudia Michalke, who used to run the Stevens County Conservation District, and it was a pretty simple thing to do. What do? You do what the board tells you to do, as long as it's not illegal or immoral. And then the last one I had, my own is very similar to what Bob was saying. Get to know your supervisors. One of the biggest things for me is find out why do they volunteer for the CD, and never forget that they're volunteering to do this. So really appreciating and understanding, what their commitment is and why they're committed to doing that really helps to be able to kind of serve them better. So that they kind of get fulfilled in, what is making them tick and continue to provide for the district as far as leadership and information and decisions and things of that nature.
Great. Thanks so much, Craig. Mark, what are you thinking about advice for new managers to work successfully with a board?
Well, I think we're going to see a common theme here, but I've got 3: know your place, know your board, and know your limitations. So know your place, as Craig pointed out, the board members are the policymakers. We district managers are not and should not be policymakers, and they should just simply implement the policies of the board. Of course, we can assist, and we probably all do, the board members with those policies by gathering information and making sure they're well informed, making sure that it's administratively feasible to implement that policy. But they are the board, they are the directors, we are the implementers. Know your board, just like the other two said. What do they do for a living? What motivates them? What's their personal interests? What are potential skill set that they bring that you can tap into? We use our board members all the time for, God, I don't know what to feed a cow, so I pick up the phone, And then my last one is know your limitations. I'm with Greg. If the board asks you to do something, you do it. But if you know you can't do it, then look for help. And that could be help from a consultant, another conservation district, another employee, or even the board itself. And so, don't try to fool your board that, oh yeah, I can do everything and I'm all things to all people. Ask for help if you need it.
Great advice, Mark. Thank you. Renee, what's your advice for new managers working successfully with a board?
Try. Just there's a couple things. A lot of what folks have already touched on. Knowing your role as staff and knowing your board's role as supervisors, whether it be the specific RCW or just a clear delineation of responsibilities, as in my job is to do X, Y, and Z, and the board's job is to do A, B, and C. Having that clear distinction so that you can provide information so that they can help you and really answer those questions. What do I need from you? So that each board meeting and each interaction is really fruitful, and so that there's actually a product coming out at the end. And it really, if you can, try through some sidelines to understand the past history, those conflicts or elephants in the room. They really help. They've helped me smooth things over some certain situations that, say, my board had with Department of Ecology, or why we don't work with certain producers because this instance burnt a bridge. You know, that helps you understand a little bit more to move forward so that you can find some other way to make those connections. Yeah, and also just standing by the board's decision. There have been instances where my board voted against something that all of the staff wanted. And I had to be very clear with staff that this is not your decision, this is the board's decision. And whether it's a policy or something, they have united together and said this is their decision. And so we as staff are going to abide by that. And so that's important, that we just know our place and know that, you know, we are governed by the board. They're the ones whose liability is on the line as well. It's not just, say, the manager or the leader in charge. There's more to it. It's more of a team, but just know your place.
Thanks, Renee. Great advice. Let me turn to our attendees here for a moment. Anyone in our audience today have a piece of advice to share around working successfully with a board? You can feel free to drop that in the questions box or raise your hand. If you'd like to share that verbally, we can unmute you and you can chime in here as well. Okay, I think, let me see, Mike, you should be good to go.
Yeah, in the past, I've had employees that just quite honestly came out and said, they don't understand why we have a board and that it seems like it's too encumbersome, and that it'd be easier if it was just like an agency where you have a director and then staff below. And I try to explain to them what the benefits are and why it's good to have a board, and how the way we do things, being locally led, of how that is a positive nature. And at one time, the staffer basically kind of pushed back on it. And I said, well, then you really need to examine if this is the right place for you to be being employed. Because if you don't understand or believe in the way that we do things, it's going to be really difficult for you to move forward and function in this system. And some people just are, that's just not their jam. And that, as a manager, I think that you have to recognize that and be okay with it, and help that employee to move on to what's best for their life. Because it's trying to make something work with someone that doesn't want to be there is just not going to be a positive environment.
Thanks for sharing that, Mike. Yeah, sometimes the best outcome can be helping someone find something else that makes them happy, right? So I see a question coming in to the questions box. Let's see, if I have a divided board with lots of differing opinions, how do I best get to know them without looking biased? Is it phone call, lunch, dinner? This is my third day as district manager. So welcome, Kim. Welcome to the Conservation District family. And I'm going to punt that question to our panelists today. If I have a divided board, how best to get to know them without looking biased?
I would say no to dinner. Yeah. Coffee might be okay, but it really depends on your situation. I'll trust the other folks to chime in too.
I would say give everybody equal amount of time. I think if you give one person 30 minutes, give every one of them 30 minutes and get to know each one of them. I think that's one of the best ways to remove bias. But I agree with Renee. I wouldn't be accepting meals per se. Coffee, I think you're okay with. I think a lot of particularly farmers and ranchers, that meeting over a cup of coffee or something like that is pretty normal for them, and that wouldn't be considered, I think, too far out of line. But yeah, definitely giving them equal treatment of time, I think, is the first step.
I would try to have a place maybe at the end of a board meeting, when you're adjourned, to try to get the board to talk about why they're being divided, and maybe right in a board meeting, and so they understand each other's point of views and they respect that. That could be a very difficult one, as we all know, because we've seen like what happened at Thurston. But it's communication. There's somebody doesn't like what's going on, find out why, and see how you can get them all on the same page.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Bob. First thing I would try to do is find out what's the divisive issues at hand, and then quite honestly, I would try to avoid those, so that you're basically looking for common ground as opposed to pitting one side against the other. And if there's something that is going to be divisive, then try your best just to stay away from it.
I would really emphasize what Mark said, finding that common ground, and try to focus it if you can on CD activities. So what does the board want from the conservation district? Why are they attending? Why are each of them attending? And from that, pool in their common unification as a board. It's a challenge, but it can work.
Lots of good advice there. Hopefully that will help you out a bit, Kim. I would also say, when I've seen enough, let's say there's enough turnover on a board that maybe you've got enough new voices or enough new personalities there, that sometimes the time is right to kick off a refresh of your long-range strategic plan. And sometimes that can help you come together, both as the board team and the staff team, around what's in that strategic plan that you want to accomplish. So Mike?
Shauna, you just stole one of the things I was going to say. Was always going back to that's the best way to get them to vote as a unified board on a direction to give you marching orders that they've all agreed upon. That makes it easier for you. It makes it easier for them. And kind of tied to that is when I've had this experience where board members will come up and tell you to do something individually, and you have to remember, if it's something little, like, can you please get me this or something like that, that's one thing. But when they're giving you direction or telling you to do something with a staff member or something like that, that is something that's a decision, a communication that comes from the board as a whole, even if it comes down to a majority vote. That is your saving grace. It makes it easier. In a way, it kind of takes that decision making out of your hands in those situations. And you don't want to be micromanaged, but in those tough situations, having it come from the board, as the panel members have said, I totally agree that we serve at the pleasure of the board. And if you go back to that, it'll understand those roles and responsibilities. Believe me, it will save your bacon sometimes.
Thanks for sharing that, Mike.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on Mike's. I've had board members, same thing, come to me and ask me to do something, and it's like, hey, as long as the board tells me to do it, I'm in. So go to the board. And as a manager, you need to be very clear about that every time. Yeah, small things, no biggie, but you need to set boundaries. And some districts like a very formal process to set boundaries. I've always been much more informal, but you need to set those boundaries.
Thanks for sharing that, Mark. I'm having a little deja vu from our governance discussion that we kicked off at 11 this morning. So sometimes the boundaries do need to be very formalized, and that can be in the form of governance policies. Of course, it doesn't have to be for your district, but if you feel like maybe you're headed down a road where that would be beneficial, then sometimes kicking off that discussion at the board level can be helpful as well. So let's pivot now and take a look at that second question about advice for engaging and working well with county and local government partners. And Bob, I'm going to go back to you. What's your advice for engaging and working well with county and local government partners?
I'll start back from way back when I started the district. I just try to get involved and go to as many meetings as you can to get people to know who you are and what districts can do to maybe help them. One thing that was very helpful for me is I was fortunate and had the ability to get on our lead entity habitat work group right off the bat when it started for the Chehalis Basin, and I was actually became chairman. I've been chairman of that group for probably 20 years, and it's been very helpful to get to know a lot of people from the NGOs, the regional fisheries enhancement groups, the other districts that are in the watershed, and it's been a real success for us in the basin is getting money on the ground. But the one thing that I don't know, this to me, this is a big part of it. If you're always going to run into, occasionally you're going to run into people that aren't happy with what's going on, and and maybe it'll be in an email you got, a phone call you got, and especially with emails, I find it don't respond real quickly to something that you might have something negative to say. Sit back and think about it for maybe overnight. Sometimes if it can be really contentious, maybe just go away for a day or two, and maybe it'll just dissolve. But I found that you're better off to do that than to try to create arguments or get people to maybe not like the way you operate or the way the districts operate, because the districts do a lot of good things and people will understand that, and all we got to do is do what we do, and they'll come around. As far as communicating, I think the main thing is just don't burn bridges with people when you get to those situations. Make sure they understand what we can offer them, and then they'll come to us when they can. A perfect example is Weyerhaeuser has come to me now twice and asking me, and I know other districts have helped them, but historically there's a company that we never dealt with, and all of a sudden they're coming around and working with us again. So it's really it's nice to see that they allow us to go up in the upper watersheds and get some work done for the good of the fish. So that's about all I have on that one, Donna.
Well, thanks, Bob. Craig, what's your advice?
So the first thing that I would suggest, as far as engaging with partners, and particularly like county and whatnot, is invite them to a board meeting, and invite them individually. Don't invite the entire slate of county commissioners or executives or whatever. Just invite one at a time. Get to know them. Let them get to know and see what the board does and the projects that the district's working on. I think that can be very powerful. Also, of course, right along with that, invite the same folks to project sites and tours. If you're conducting those, let them see the stuff on the ground, let them talk to the landowners and how they enjoy working with the district. I think that those are really helpful. Maybe even at one time, and probably I need to get back to doing it. It's been a little bit kind of messed up the last few years, but we used to do a regular bi-monthly presentation to our county commissioners, just giving them project updates. We would go to them and give them updates on things that were going on with the district, with our projects, things like that. We found those to be very helpful. And oftentimes there would be department heads that we worked with there, you know, from the county planning office, maybe public works, or, you know, in our case, emergency management now. You know, so sometimes we can have those interactions too there, and those are really helpful. Make sure they're all receiving your newsletter. That way they're getting those updates with everybody else. Include their staff, from line staff to department heads, you name it, in project collaboration discussions. You know, when you're having meetings with project partners and whatever, it's always good to include maybe, you know, a few more than you really think you might need, because you never know when that critical piece of information or assistance might be in the hands of somebody else there. And then the other thing that I had on my list was, you know, empower your planners and other staff, your technicians and whatnot, to formulate their own relationships with partners. You really want to try and strengthen that relationship. So it's not just one person at your district with each of your partners. There's always room to have multiple levels of partnership, because you never know when staff changes and the next person in you might not get along with. But if you already have a good maintained relationship between, say, one of your planners and one of their resource folks, it can help kind of smooth out that transition quite a bit. So those are all things that we've tried to do over the years, you know, just really, you know, being inclusive as much as possible in our project planning. And, you know, getting back to the comments others have made, you know, when you start doing your 5-year planning, you know, not only is it important for your board, but it's really important for your partners, particularly like the county and tribes and other, you know, critical groups to have a say in that kind of stuff, because they all have needs too, and a lot of them overlap with things that we would traditionally do. So getting their input in that is always a good positive step. So.
Thanks, Craig. Mark, let's go to you, to your advice.
Provide value, you know, try to add value to what the county or local government is doing, as opposed to potentially duplicating something. If you add value to their programs, they want as much help as they possibly can get. Quite often, especially in like the county planning department, they're running in so many different directions when it comes to natural resource issues. And if they've got a friend out there that can help them, they really like that. The other one is be competent and honest. And I think that's just, you know, speaks for itself. And then I agree 100% with what Craig was saying. Keep them informed of what's going on. We don't meet, you know, we frequently with our county commissioners, for instance, but we at least see them once a year and give them an update on our programs and activities so that they know what we're doing out there. And also, you know, that relationship with the staff of that government is very important, because if you can walk in there with a staff member that decision-making body trusts, and that staff member is supporting you, that goes a long ways. Because, you know, the county commissioners, for instance, are working with their staff, they're not working with you. But if they look to their staff and the staff are going thumbs up, yeah, you guys are doing a great thing, then that really smooths the road, as it were.
Thank you, Mark. Renee, what's your advice?
Same thing as the group, but just different words. So first, be reciprocal. It's one thing to invite somebody to be a part of your work group, and then, you know, 6 months later to have them do the same thing, and then you say, oh no, I can't, I don't have enough time. It's just one of those faux pas that you step up to the table. If you're going to ask something of them, you better be willing to participate and share. A second would be to make sure that you share opportunities, whether you have a really great intern and you know that they're struggling with a certain component. You know, maybe there's a way to collaborate there, or maybe, you know, if they're struggling with a state agency, you can give them a nudge on a resource that that state agency needs or has an in. Just those connections would be really helpful. Also following through. that's the part of that being competent and honest. You have to, if you say you're going to do something, do it. And also when you do interact with them, to make sure that you accommodate how their other departments are helping you. So when you do your incremental updates to your legislators or your county commissioners, thank them for their participation, because they're going to get calls from their constituents, and also thank them for how their departments and their different staff have worked with you or have contributed in the past. That lets them know that, aha, my staff are doing their job, or aha, this department that I hate and is really awful is actually not that bad and has been helpful. So that just builds bridges that you are reliable. So yeah, be reciprocal, share opportunities, and follow through.
Thanks, Renee. Great wisdom there from all of our panelists. Anyone else in our audience have any advice that they would like to share about engaging and working well with county and local government partners? Raise your hand, or don't hesitate to drop some remarks in the questions box. Go ahead, Mike. You should be just self-muted now.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at advice when working with county commissioners and county government, I think it depends heavily on what county you're from. If you're from an urban or very populated area, your interaction is probably going to be much more minimal, and you're going to probably be working with very specific departments within the county. And so that is one tactic. But when you're living in a small community, a smaller county, there's a whole range of tactics that you can use, and everything from, I mean, I'm going to openly say this, I go to both political parties' annual meetings, and so I get to know who the who's who is, and I get to talk to either the elected official or the candidates themselves. I get to know them. I explain what we do. And that's been the inroads for me to get a lot of work done. Our counties are very important partners in what we do. I don't think we give that enough recognition often. They're probably some of our best partners if you get them on board, because if you have your board and the county working together, there's not very much that can't be accomplished besides funding.
Thanks for sharing that, Mike. Saw a great comment come in the questions box from Tom. It's all about relationships, respect, and trust. Very true, Tom. Some sage words there. So we've run through our 2 structured questions that I had today to tease out advice from our managers panel, but we have time here to open things up for other questions that all of you out there may have for our managers panel and for each other. Looks like there is one other comment coming in, building off of Craig's note about empowering staff to build relationships, focus on CD's mission, strategy goals, and explore, emphasize common purpose when needed, map out clear roles and work relationships. And good advice there in the questions box. So this is your chance to branch out a little bit from our structured questions this afternoon. If you have a question or a piece of advice to share, don't hesitate to raise your hand or drop that in the questions box and we'll take that up.
Shauna, I can tell us a quick story about something that happened with me that has been very helpful. I'm back to the Habitat Work Group chairman. The watershed coordinator for that position, that entity actually took a job with the county, and she's now the community development director for Lewis County. So when VSP came into play, it was like a no-brainer. I met with Lee and we said, oh yeah, we can do this. And back to Mark's comments, Lee is the permit agency, that agency over there, the permit center, they're very happy that we're here to help them deal with ag related issues when it comes to critical areas. So That's been a very, very good relationship, and it's gotten better and better as VSPs went on, and I think it'll get better. And the one thing that I haven't done that I should probably be doing is right now we've only got one county commissioner that I really know really well because we have two new elected ones. I've introduced myself, but I really don't know their purpose. So I think that's another really important thing is to make sure you understand, why they ran for county commissioner and maybe get them on our side for future funding or future partnerships.
Thanks for sharing that, Bob. Question came in the box. Do any of the panelists have a question for us? So it's a chance to kick out a question to any of our panelists this afternoon.
That's a big can of worms. It's always hard when things are being recorded and we have a big group of people. It's different if we're in a room and we can go out in the hallway and have a conversation. But yeah, I can't think of anything at the moment, but I'm sure it's going to come up.
Very good, Renee. The funny afternoon question that immediately popped into my head that we could ask everyone with us this afternoon is, boxers or briefs? Right? One of those completely hilarious, totally inappropriate questions to kill a little time. Looks like we've got some more great advice into the questions box here. And thank you, Alyssa, for kicking that out to everyone. Here's a question that just came in from Zora. Do you wish there was more collaboration between districts and between managers? Great question for our panelists.
I'll speak up. I am grateful that the past year and a half, there's been much more collaboration and those manager forum meetings and sharing information on the Google Drive. It makes a big difference when we're developing policy that we can refer back to the WACD staff directory and reach out to one another. We have our emails in that directory so that we can contact. That helps us remember that we are part of this big family that have all these resources. Nobody's perfect, but at least we know who to talk to in order to vent for 30 seconds or share a policy or something.
I'll just add that I agree that I think we're missing an opportunity to be able to see each other out in the hallway or whatever and ask questions. Being able to network with other district managers has always been, for me, one of the top reasons to attend WADE or WACD or any numerous other meetings where several of us at least get together. There's always something new to be learned. It doesn't matter to me whether you've been with a district for 20 years or 2 days. There's things we can all learn from each other. So I would love to see it happen. If we could figure out a way to make it happen a little bit more frequently. I think the biggest problem we have, even with the forums that we've got going is, we're all so stinking busy to try and come up with, who's going to lead the conversation or come up with the loaded questions to start the conversations. Maybe, that takes time and dedication, and I think that's where we struggle. But we can certainly use it, I think. So.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Renee and Craig both. I think the more we get together, the more I learn. Every time I've gotten together with district managers, I've learned different techniques and different avenues of doing things. It's absolutely astonishing how we can have 45 districts out there doing kind of 45 different things, but yet we're all protecting natural resources in some way or another, and we're all successful at it. So it's very encouraging to me to get together always with district managers, and I do miss the hallway conversations.
Yeah, I think over the years I've definitely seen more collaboration forming. Benton and Franklin have a formal collaboration agreement, but we'll reach out and grab staff from Walla Walla Conservation District for fish screen projects, for instance. Not our cup of tea, but you know, Renee's got staff that does it, and so especially from a technical staff perspective, I think we could probably see a little more collaboration there. You know, instead of trying to create your own in-house expert on a project that you might only do a few times a year, let's start sharing.
Another comment I see here in the chat box: attend other district board meetings or WACD area meetings outside your area. Reach out maybe a little bit further beyond your region in the state. Great advice there. Also a comment in the chat box: the Puget Sound CD Caucus meets monthly to discuss common issues. So one format already at play and in practice in the state to help districts collaborate. Another comment: steal all ideas. Love it. Good comment. And then a couple of questions. So let's see. The first one I see popping up in the box: is there anything that commission staff could do to help you in your work? Maybe something we're not doing today that you would like to see us do. I'll punt that to the panelists first, but also open to anyone else on with us this afternoon. Anything that the commission staff could do to help you in your work?
Just keep doing what you're doing. For me, I mean, if I need some help, I don't hesitate to go to the regional manager or the commission financial staff. Very competent, great people to work with. I'm always very awarded with the conversations and the help we get from the commission. So yeah, use them, definitely.
I'll second that.
I agree as well. If we're not asking our regional managers for help and we're stumped, that's kind of our own fault for not asking. They are there to help us. And if they don't know the answer, they will search and find somebody who does. So it's been awesome working with you guys.
Yeah, and I concur. I've been around long enough where there was times when I wanted nothing to do with commission staff. But I think the current group is highly competent and have been very helpful. And so I like the direction that the commission is moving in that regards.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate that feedback. If you think of something later on, don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. You can drop it in the questions box or send any of the regional managers an email as well. Another question popped in: any tips on avoiding being overwhelmed by the workload? We're constantly busy, never seem to have enough money to hire more help, and ultimately the work lands on the manager's shoulders. I'm finding myself constantly stressed. Any
Delegate.
advice for that manager? Delegate.
Delegate.
You were right.
One thing that I learned a long time ago is you have to learn how to say no. And people don't like to say no, but you got to learn that skill.
I agree with Mark. You know, if you don't learn to say no, and I'm one of the worst at it, I'll be the first to admit it. My staff would probably shoot me for even being the one to agree with that comment, because I don't do it very well myself. But you know, I think Mark even said earlier, you know, about setting boundaries. You know, that's part of it, because if you think about it, I mean, what's worse, saying no now or saying yes and then not delivering and looking all the more the fool for committing to something you couldn't do. So. I think another part too, though, is if you are constantly feeling that way, you need to talk to your board about it and discuss, you know, maybe what are really the priorities for the district. That could even be part of your 5-year plan. But yeah, and Renee, I agree. You know, delegate, let others learn leadership and management of projects and programs and things like that. You just, you know, set the boundaries for them and what they have to do to communicate what's going on and things like that. So
yeah, I completely agree with all those comments. When I first started here at the district, I had a motto: if you know how to do something and you want it done right, do it yourself. Well, that goes away in a hurry if you want to get everything done when the district employees, because I have very good employees. Surround yourself with good people that know what they're doing, and the longer you can keep them, the better. I have unfortunately, my administrative assistant's going to be retiring this year. Been here since 1985. Two major employees, my GIS CREP coordinator and my special projects coordinator, have been here since 2000. So, I mean, they know exactly how to do things and they're very good at it. So it's really easy to delegate that kind of stuff to them. But just remember, whatever you got left to do, it'll be there tomorrow. You don't, and try to meet timelines. That's the main thing I do. But find a stress reliever, whether it's going fishing, listen to rock and roll, going and walking, do something to relieve the stress, to think about it in a different avenue. What I've done here during COVID, I forced myself to actually go out in the field a few times just as a stress reliever, to go look at the rivers, and it's been very helpful for me at times to get out in the field and to see what the other staff's doing, what they're up to, and how it works. And if you know how to do it, and they know how to do it, it makes everything better. And then you can trust each other.
Thank you, Bob. A suggestion in the questions box that shows the importance of cross-training and successional planning for important positions. Good point there. Also, a comment from Tom. I don't say no. I give my board a qualified yes. Yes, I can do that, but something else has to be set aside to accomplish it. I need your help in deciding what other priority won't get done. That approach often results in a withdrawal of the request. That's a great way to highlight when just piling on, right, Tom, can easily overwhelm the manager or the executive director. Maybe the board isn't really cognizant of what kind of workload you're carrying around in that position. That helps reflect it back to them. Great suggestion, Tom. Let me see, what other questions do we have? Oh, another comment from Renee. Don't delay hiring when you have funds and the workload. Another good suggestion there. So another question I saw come through, and we'll start this off with the panel. Is there a mistake you've made, any kind of a mistake, that you learned from and you're willing to share with the group today?
Which one?
It's your choice, your pick, right? If you're willing to share.
That's the qualifier, though, if you're willing to share.
I'll start. Craig,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'm trying to think of just one, and yeah.
Sounds like you've got one, Renee.
Well, Craig's thinking, I am a very bossy person. I have no problem stepping into that role. But I was very new when it came to a leadership position, and I was placed here. And so it was one thing that the board of supervisors asked for things to be a certain way, and that's fine. But when you shake things up just because you're trying to streamline and you don't quite understand the priorities of your board, it's always interesting when they look at you and they scratch their head and say, why are you doing this? You know that that's not what we wanted. We want our board packets to be in 14 font size instead of 12. Just these random things. Listen to your board. That's a very benign example, but that's what I'm willing to share.
Thanks, Renee.
I can't think of anything specifically, but I know I've done lots of things wrong in my life, especially here at the board, at the district. But the main thing, just admit it. admit it as soon as you know you did something wrong and it's not right. Admit that you did something wrong and fix it. You know, what's the best way to fix it? Go after it and get it resolved. A lot of times you can get things like that resolved instantly, and sometimes it may take a day or two, but main thing is just to admit that you did something wrong and go fix it.
Yeah, I was Bob stole my thunder. Um, I can't think of one mistake because there's so many of them. And the key is recognizing it, fixing it, and moving on, and not dwelling on it. I mean, it's how you respond to that error that determines whether or not, you know, that error just balloons into a, you know, mushroom cloud. And so it's, you know, be very honest. Hey, don't throw people under the bus. I mean, as a manager, at the end of the day, you are responsible for the functioning of the district. And so if when the staff members screw up, you're responsible for it. Fix it, move on, be accountable.
Yeah, I agree with the others. I was sitting here and I thought of many, and I would probably share them, but it would require a beer at the grotto, I think. And since that's not an option this year, you'll have to wait at least a few months. But I do agree with what everybody else was saying. You know, and the only thing I could possibly add to it is just really just different words of much of the same thing, is learn from your mistakes. You know, it's okay to make them, you know, and like they said, own it, you know, and move on from it, but learn from it. Don't make the same mistake twice. So.
Great advice. A few things coming in through the questions box. And Zora, let me get to that mute button so you can offer yours verbally if you'd like.
Hi, this one's just really quick. It's not a question, it's more because it sounds like maybe there's some other newer district managers on the line. And one of my best pieces of advice, I don't remember who gave it to me, it was probably Tom, was to tell your board what's going to happen and then have the thing happen and then tell your board that the thing happened. So if you have a contract that you're going to bring to your board, tell them in advance that you're bringing them a contract. Give them context and a month to think about it. Then go over the contract with your board, and then the following month, like, button it all up. And that, I mean, that's pretty extreme, but taking that advice has really helped me. If you have something that's coming up that you're like, maybe the board should know about this, just email them and just let them know. It doesn't have to be a decision or anything. Just, hey, this thing is coming up, just a heads up, because you're way more likely to kind of cover your bases with that than if you don't say anything at all and they bring it to you or something implodes. So that would be my biggest piece of advice.
Thanks, Zora. More
Yeah, Sean,
good.
this is Bob. I got another quick comment on that. This is something that I think all districts do, but I just like don't know for sure. But I write a monthly report the Wednesday before we meet on the fourth Wednesday. The third Wednesday, I write a report, goes out on Thursday. Cheryl sends out the agenda, all the information that goes with it. So the board is very aware of what we're going to be discussing, and they're going to be making decisions on before they come into the meeting if they read your packets. And some of them don't, and you find that out very quickly who don't. And sometimes it's, you know, because they're on vacation or something's going on, but it can be very helpful. So then they're already aware of what they need to approve at our meeting before they walk into the meeting.
I remember I used to get really upset with one board member who always seemed to not really understand what was going on, but he was also the same board member that showed up at the meeting and opened his packet, sitting at the meeting with his pocket knife. And he just sat there with it in front of him. He never read it. He never even thumbed through it during the meeting, but then he would, you know, well, I don't understand what's going on. It's right there in that packet in front of you, you know, but yeah, you have to deal with those issues with tact and some decorum. But yeah, it's definitely tough. But I agree, you know, make sure that they know about that stuff ahead of time. So, or at least give them the opportunity to know about it ahead of time. Maybe that's the.
Thanks, Craig. Tom, looks like you're self-muted.
Yeah, and I'm glad you can't see my face because I'm wincing as I remember some of these painful lessons. Especially for our newer folks, do whatever you can to avoid getting sideways with a couple, one or two members of your board. That happened to me at Ferry. It happened to me with the Conservation Commission Board. It happened to me at Clackamas. And those are potentially career-ending moments. Sometimes you just got to suck it up and look past that moment where you see nothing but red and be better than your board members. The odds are, if you can do that, you will outlast all those problem board members. And Craig nods his head. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Tom. We've also had a couple more pieces of advice come in the questions box. Alyssa is kicking those out to all of you, but I will recap a few of them here. Make sure and submit invoices to the commission before the end of the fiscal year deadline. Thank you, Bill. Thanks for that reminder. Sarah says, be careful not to speak in absolutes. A lot of things change and people, board and staff rely on your guidance and advice. You can give confident direction and be sure that everyone knows the risks, concerns, etc. This allows people to remain confident in your direction without making false promises. Great piece of advice there. So we're just about out of time for today. I don't want to cut us off prematurely. If there are other questions, comments, advice that anyone has burning on the top of their mind that they would love to share, now's your chance. For any of the panelists, if you're an attendee, just raise your hand or use that questions box.
I was just going to say, I can't believe Tom Salzer's personality would piss anybody off.
You can't see
Sean,
it,
I
but I have
just
a big
want to
smile
say
on my
if
face.
anybody, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Bob.
I just want to say if any beginning district manager or Craig or Renee or Mark or anybody wants to call me and talk to me about something, don't hesitate, because that's how we would do it. I think that's a mechanism that we need to stay in place, and if anybody needs advice or I'm doing something that they think that I could help them with, don't hesitate to give me a call.
I agree, and call more than one manager. You're going to learn something new from each one of us. So, and we might approach a problem completely different. I can guarantee you, we would approach the problems differently from each other. So.
Great advice. Any last words, Renee, Mark, as we wrap up today?
Just remember you're not alone, and it's okay to have a piece of humble pie every now and then. Just move forward.
Thanks, Renee. I do see one more hand up, I think, if my list of names would stop moving around here. Okay. Mike Norden, looks like you're self-muted if you have a comment to share. Okay, I think we might have lost him. Where'd you go, Mike?
Oh, I was going to say, I've said this in the past, and I said it earlier in the comments, steal as much as you can. It's okay. And if you're a new manager, I can't stress enough, going to Wade and WACD and just going and talking to other managers and other supervisors is invaluable. I could not have survived being a new manager without listening to the folks that had been there before me.
Thanks, Mike. Great advice. One more comment I've got here in the questions box. Something I've done recently that seems really valuable is develop, with board input, a board operations manual. This included input and hopefully ownership from the board and outlines expectations for behavior and communication. It also provides a self-evaluation opportunity for individual board members to reflect on why they're on the board and how they're doing. Now we just have to make time to refresh our memories of this annually and update our self-evaluations. So another great piece of advice in the questions box there